Stand in front of your own mirror tonight. The good light, not the kind kitchen bulb that's kind to nobody, and look close at your own face for a long minute. If you are past 60, you already know what you are going to see. The lines that used to come and go with a smile now stay put. The skin along the jaw that used to snap back when you pinched it now takes its sweet time getting there. There is a softness gathering under the chin that was not there a few winters back, and a dryness across the cheeks no amount of lotion seems to truly settle anymore. And you have probably done what I did for years, which is reach for a jar. A serum, a cream, something in a little glass bottle that cost more than a week of groceries and promised you your 20s back in 6 weeks. I had a whole shelf of them once, lined up like little soldiers that never won a single battle. I want to tell you something plain before we go one step further.
That jar was never going to fix what is actually wrong. Because what is actually wrong is not sitting on top of your skin. It is sitting on your plate, or rather, it is missing from it. And nobody in a white coat or a glossy advertisement is in any hurry to tell you that, because there is a great deal of money in the jar and almost none at all in the garden.
My name is Rosie. I am past 60 myself. Raising grandchildren now the same way my mother raised me, in a kitchen that never had much money in it, but always had real food in it. I did not grow up with a dermatologist down the road. I grew up with a mother and a grandmother who fed a household of skin and bone and never once called it that. Never once talked about collagen or antioxidants, because those words were not yet in style. But they knew. The way old women always seem to know things before the science catches up and proves them right. That what showed up on a face was a report card for what had gone into a body for years before. I am not a doctor, and I will tell you plainly any time I am near the edge of something, you ought to take to your own doctor instead of taking my word for it. But I have spent more than 3 decades cooking for the people I love, watching their skin and my own, and reading every honest study I could get my hands on once the science did finally catch up. What I want to hand you today is what actually feeds skin after 60, not what is sprayed or smeared on top of it, and why almost nobody bothers to tell a woman this plainly. Here is the thing you need to understand before anything else makes sense. Your skin is not a wall. It is not paint on a fence that you can just touch up from the outside. Skin is built, fed, and rebuilt constantly from the inside, out of protein and minerals and fat that came from your last few meals. And that whole rebuilding job runs on a scaffolding called collagen. Collagen is what keeps your skin plump and springy instead of loose and thin. And here is the number that ought to make every woman past 50 sit up a little straighter in her chair. Researchers have found that a woman can lose as much as 30% of the collagen in her skin in the first 5 years after menopause alone. And after that first steep drop, she keeps losing roughly another 2% every single year on top of it. 30% gone in 5 years. That is not a slow fade. That is a cliff. And it explains something that puzzles so many women. Why the mirror seemed fine for decades and then changed so fast it felt like betrayal. It was not betrayal. It was hormones pulling the rug out from under the very system that built your face, and there was no warning label on it. Now, your body can still build new collagen after 60,
It does not stop being able to. What changes is that the raw materials get harder to come by, and the body gets less efficient at using them, which means the food you eat matters more after 60 than it ever did before, not less. The jar on your sink cannot supply raw material. Only your fork can do that. So let us go through, one at a time, what actually belongs on that fork, plainly, with the why behind each one, and the honest limits of each one too, because I will not oversell you a single thing today. The first thing is bone broth, and I want to start here because it gives your body the actual building blocks it is short on. When you simmer bones, the knuckle bones, the marrow bones, a chicken carcass with the feet still on if you can get them, slow and low for many hours with a splash of vinegar in the water, you pull collagen itself out of that bone and connective tissue, and it breaks down into gelatin, which is rich in two particular building blocks called glycine and proline. Those two are the backbone of the collagen your own skin is trying to rebuild every single day. Think of it like this. If your skin is a brick wall, losing bricks faster than it can lay new ones, Broth hands you a wheelbarrow of bricks. I want to be honest with you here because I have read the skeptics and they have a fair point. A jar of broth you buy at the store, even a good one, is often thin and weak compared to what simmers on your own stove for 18 or 20 hours. And not every homemade batch turns out rich either. The way you know you got it right is the jiggle test. Let a jar of your finished broth cool in the icebox overnight. If it sets up soft and wobbly like a gentle gelatin, you got real collagen out of those bones. If it stays thin and watery, you did not simmer it long enough, or you did not have enough connective tissue in the pot. So do it again with knuckle bones and a longer simmer next time. A pot of bones from the butcher runs you a few dollars, sometimes free if you ask nicely for the scraps. And it makes broth enough for a week of soups, rice, and sipping plain from a mug, the way my grandmother did on a cold afternoon. I will tell you honestly that I did not believe in any of this the first year I tried it. I started one October, mostly out of stubbornness, because a granddaughter of mine had been after me about my dry hands and my drier face, and I figured I would humour her through the cold months and prove there was nothing to it. I kept a pot of bones going most weeks, ate my greens with citrus the way I am about to tell you, and did not change one other thing about my life. Not my walking, not my soap, nothing. By February, my own husband, who notices very little about anything that is not a tractor, asked me what I had done differently, because my hands had stopped cracking open at the knuckles, the way they had every winter for 15 years running. I am not telling you that to sell you a miracle. I am telling you because it took one ordinary season for an old, stubborn body to show a real, visible difference. And that is the kind of timeline I want you walking into this with. Not 6 weeks, a season. The second thing, and this one surprises people every time I say it, is vitamin C. And here is why it matters every bit as much as the broth. Your body cannot actually stitch those glycine and proline building blocks into finished collagen without vitamin C standing right there doing the welding. Without it, the raw material just sits there unused. There is an old, hard lesson about this from sailing ships centuries ago. Sailors who went months without fresh fruit or vegetables came down with scurvy, and one of the cruelest signs of it was their skin breaking down, old wounds reopening, gums bleeding, the whole structure of the body falling apart at the seams. Because their bodies had plenty of protein from salted meat,
but no vitamin C to actually build it into collagen. That is how essential this one nutrient is to the whole job. Now, you are not sailing to the other side of the world on hard biscuit, but the lesson still holds. Eating all the gelatin and bone broth in the world while skipping the vitamin C is like buying every brick in town and never hiring a single mason. Bell peppers, the red and yellow ones especially, citrus fruit, strawberries, broccoli and kiwi are some of the richest, easiest sources, and you do not need a fortune of it either. Just a real serving most days. A glass of fresh squeezed citrus, half a red pepper sliced into your lunch, a handful of strawberries over your morning oats. Pair that with your broth or with eggs or fish at the same meal, and you have given your body both the bricks and the mason in the same sitting. The third thing is your minerals, and this is the one almost nobody mentions because it sounds too plain to be important. But zinc and copper are doing quiet, essential work you would notice the absence of fast. Copper is what allows an enzyme in your body to cross-link collagen fibres together, locking that scaffolding into something strong instead of letting it stay loose and floppy. Zinc speeds the turnover of skin cells and the healing of any little nick or scrape, which is exactly the kind of healing that slows down so noticeably as we get older. You have probably noticed it yourself. A small cut that would have closed in 3 days at 40 now takes a week and a half past 60. That slowdown is often a mineral story as much as an age story. Pumpkin seeds, a small handful eaten plain or tossed over a salad, are rich in zinc and cost almost nothing. Oysters are the single richest food source of zinc there is, if you can get them and enjoy them. Mushrooms, the plain button kind from any grocery store, sautéed in a little butter, are a genuinely good source of copper that most people never think to credit for anything beyond flavour. And if mushrooms are not to your taste, a square or two of dark chocolate, the real kind with a high cocoa content, carries a fair bit of copper too, which is the one piece of news in this whole video I suspect nobody will mind hearing. None of these need to be fancy or expensive. A few dollars worth of pumpkin seeds in your pantry will outlast a bottle of mineral pills that costs 5 times as much and gets absorbed far less reliably than food does. The fourth thing is good fat, the kind that keeps your skin's own barrier intact, so it can hold on to its own moisture instead of losing it into the air all day long. Fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel are rich in omega-3 fats that calm inflammation and feed that barrier directly. And I want to put in a good word here for sardines especially, because they are one of the cheapest foods on a grocery shelf and one of the most nutrient-dense. And a great many folks turn their nose up at the tin without ever trying them properly, mashed up on toast with a little lemon and black pepper. There is also a particular oil worth knowing about called sea buckthorn, pressed from a small orange berry that grows on a hardy shrub, and it carries a fat called omega-7 that most other foods barely have any of at all. There has been real research done on this one. Women between their 50s and 70s took it for a few months in a proper study, and the ones taking the sea buckthorn showed real, measurable gains in how much moisture their skin held onto and how much spring it had back, while a comparison group taking nothing of the kind showed no such change. You can find sea buckthorn as an oil or a capsule at most health food stores, and it is not the cheapest item on this list, but a little goes a long way and it lasts months in the cupboard. Flaxseed, ground fresh and sprinkled over your breakfast, and walnuts, a small handful as a snack, give you a plant version of the same kind of fat if fish is not your habit. The fifth thing is colour, plain and simple. The deep reds, purples and blues in berries, and a particular reddish pigment called astaxanthin that comes from wild salmon and from a tiny algae it is originally made by. Here is what these are actually doing, and it matters because it is a different job than the broth and the vitamin C were doing. Those first few things were about building new collagen. This one is about protecting the collagen you have already got from being torn down faster than you can replace it, by sunlight, by everyday wear, by the slow oxidation that happens to every living tissue over time. Berries, blueberries, blackberries, dark cherries, are loaded with compounds called anthocyanins, the very thing that gives them that deep colour, and they act like a shield against that breakdown. Astaxanthin does something similar from a different angle, and there has been honest clinical research on it too. In one study that followed women between 35 and 60 for 16 weeks, the women taking astaxanthin kept their skin's wrinkle depth and moisture steady the whole time, while the group taking a plain placebo saw their skin measurably get worse over those same 4 months, simply from the ordinary passage of time and weather. A handful of berries on your cereal, a wild salmon fillet once or twice a week instead of the farmed kind when you can manage it, is a quiet, steady form of protection that costs you a normal grocery bill, not a specialty one. The sixth thing is sulfur. And I will admit, this one sounds like the least glamorous item on the whole list, but it is doing work in the background that almost nobody connects to their skin. Sulfur is a building block of keratin, the tough protein in your skin, hair and nails, and it is also needed to make glutathione, which the body uses as its master cleanup crew for the everyday wear and tear inside every cell, including the cells in your face. Eggs, garlic, onions and the cabbage family, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, are all rich in sulfur compounds, and they are about as plain and cheap as food gets. My own mother put onion and garlic in nearly everything that came out of her kitchen, not because she had read a single study about sulfur, but because that was simply how a poor household cooked. And I look back now and wonder how much of her own good skin into her 80s she owed to a habit nobody ever taught her to be proud of. The seventh thing is something my grandmother did without ever once calling it science, and that is keeping fermented food in the house at all times. She had a crock of sauerkraut going in the cellar most of the year, and buttermilk on hand for baking and drinking both. And I never thought twice about either, until I read what researchers have been turning up about the gut and the skin in the last couple of decades. The two are wired together more closely than most folks ever imagine. A gut that is inflamed and out of balance sends that inflammation outward through the bloodstream, and skin, being one of the most richly supplied organs in the whole body, often shows that inflammation first as redness, breakouts, or a general dullness that no cream ever quite clears. Foods like plain yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, and good aged cheese carry living cultures that help keep that gut lining calm and balanced, which in turn keeps the inflammation from ever reaching your face in the first place. None of this is a cure for a real skin condition, and if something is genuinely wrong with your skin, that is your doctor's conversation to have, not mine. But a small jar of plain yogurt or a forkful of sauerkraut alongside your supper most days is cheap, it keeps, and it is quietly doing work in a direction most women never think to look. The eighth thing, and the last one I want to walk you through, is water. But I have to correct something here that gets repeated so often it has become almost gospel, and it is only half true. Drinking 8 glasses of plain water a day will not by itself fix dry, papery skin, and I know that disappoints folks because it is the simplest advice there is. The truth is that water needs help to actually stay in your skin instead of passing straight through you. That help comes from electrolytes, the minerals like potassium and sodium that hold water inside your cells, and from the very fats we already talked about, which form the barrier that keeps that water from evaporating off your skin into the air the moment it gets there. Cucumber and watermelon are wonderful because they bring water and real potassium together in the same bite. My grandmother used to keep a jug of mint and lemon water steeping on the counter all summer. Nothing fancy, just water with real flavour in it, so a body would actually drink enough of it. And that habit, paired with the good fats we already covered, did more for her skin in August than any amount of plain water gulped down out of obligation ever could on its own. Now, before I tell you why almost nobody hands a woman this whole list in one place, I want to give you the honest caveats. Because I promised you plain talk, and I intend to keep that promise all the way through. None of what I just told you will undo what years in the sun without protection have already done. And it will not undo what smoking does, because smoking breaks down collagen directly, and no amount of broth on earth outruns a pack a day. A glass of wine now and then is one thing, but heavy, regular drinking dehydrates skin from the inside in a way no cucumber water fixes. I will add one more honest thing here, and it is not a food at all, but it belongs in the same conversation. Poor sleep and a chest full of worry both raise a hormone called cortisol, and cortisol left high for months at a time speeds up the very breakdown of collagen we have spent this whole video trying to slow down. You can eat perfectly and still lose ground if you are not sleeping and not finding some way to set your worries down at the end of the day. I am not going to pretend I have solved that one myself most weeks, but it belongs on this list as plainly as the broth does. If you are on blood thinners, talk to your doctor before loading up heavily on the cabbage family and dark leafy greens because of the vitamin K in them, and your doctor needs to know either way. And if you have any kidney trouble, a high-protein push toward broth and bone stock is a conversation to have with your doctor first, not a habit to start on your own say-so. Genetics plays its own hand too, and I will not pretend food erases what your own mother and grandmother handed down in your bones. What food can do, honestly, is help your body do its best with what it has got, and at 60 and past it, that is not a small thing. That is most of the thing, plain and simple. So why does almost nobody lay this out for a woman plainly, the way I just did? I do not think there is a man in a back room somewhere plotting to keep you in the dark, because that is rarely how these things actually work. It is simpler and a little sadder than a plot. There is enormous money in a jar of serum you buy again every 6 weeks for the rest of your life. And there is almost none at all in a pot of bones you simmer once and eat from for a week. Walk into any department store counter and you will find a small jar of retinol or peptide cream running anywhere from $40 to $150. And you will be back for another one before 2 months are out, because that is exactly how the business is built to work. A whole week of broth, peppers, pumpkin seeds, eggs, and a tin of sardines, food that does the actual building and protecting we just spent half an hour on, costs less than one of those jars, and feeds your whole family besides. A skincare company can run an advertisement on every screen you own, every single day, for years. A red bell pepper cannot. Your own doctor, bless them, gets maybe 12 minutes with you at a visit, barely enough time to handle the blood pressure and the prescriptions, let alone walk you through bone broth and sea buckthorn oil. So the food knowledge just quietly stops getting passed down, not hidden from you on purpose, just never worth anyone's marketing budget to hand you, while the serum companies spend whatever it takes to make sure you never stop reaching for the jar. Let me gather all of it up plain, the way I like to leave things. Build new collagen with broth rich enough to jiggle when it's cold. And never eat that protein without vitamin C standing right beside it doing the welding. Feed the cross-linking and the healing with a small daily handful of pumpkin seeds and the occasional plate of mushrooms. Protect your skin's own barrier and hold its moisture in with fatty fish and a little sea buckthorn oil if you can get it. Shield the collagen you already have with colour, berries most days, and wild salmon when you can manage it. Do not skip the plain, unglamorous sulphur in your eggs, your garlic, your onions, and your cabbage family vegetables. Keep something fermented in the house, yogurt, kefir, or a crock of sauerkraut to keep the inflammation that starts in your gut from ever reaching your face. Give your water something to hold on to, electrolytes and good fat, instead of expecting plain water to do that job alone. And mind your sleep and your worry the same as you mind your plate, because cortisol will undo quiet, patient work if you let it run wild for months on end. Here is what I want you to do this week, and it costs you the price of a normal grocery trip, nothing more. Put a pot of bones on the stove this weekend, low and slow, and check it for that soft jiggle once it has cooled. Add 1 real serving of vitamin C to the same meal every time you eat protein, citrus, peppers or berries, whichever is easiest to reach for. Toss a small handful of pumpkin seeds into your bag or your pocket for the week, the way some women carry mince. Put 1 fatty fish meal on your calendar before Sunday. Pick up a small tub of plain yogurt or a jar of sauerkraut and have a little of it most days, the way my grandmother always had something fermented sitting in her cellar without ever calling it a strategy. And go to bed 20 minutes earlier than you think you can spare, because that one is free and it works on every single thing we talked about today. That is the whole assignment, and not one part of it asks you to spend money on a jar. Tell me down in the comments how old you are and what your own mother or grandmother fed you that you only now realise was good for your skin all along, because I read every single one of these and I learn something new from your kitchens every time. And tell me if you try the broth this week, because I want to hear how the jiggle test turns out for you. Next time, I want to sit down with you and go through the handful of foods that quietly work against your skin after 60, the ones sitting in plenty of kitchens right now that nobody warns a woman about either, and what to swap them for without giving up the foods you actually enjoy. Until then, feed yourself the way you would feed someone you love, because for the rest of your life, that someone is you.